Welcome, listeners and viewers, to northeastvalleynews.org. You are listening to This Day in Sport, our flagship sports podcast here at northeastvalleynews.org. You may also be listening to us on Spotify at NEVN FM. Thank you for that as well. Today's Tuesday, December 5th. My name's Ole Olafson. I am here with other people as well. On microphone number 1 today is Chance LeBlanc.
Hello.
Welcome, Chance. Sitting next to him is Mike Brown. He's back in the studio. Hello, Mike.
Big business was happening.
Yep.
Standing on business.
Mike took a little time off, and now he came back, and should be fun. On microphone number 3 is Ethan Cohen.
What's up, party people?
I'm doing well, actually.
I work out.
We are here today to discuss things involved in sports. When we get to our main event, the thing that we're going to discuss today is the thing that many other sports fans are discussing as well, and have been since Sunday afternoon's selection of the top 4 teams for the college football playoff. We're going to go jump into that after our 2-minute warning. The 2-minute warning is where we go around the studio and each of us talks about something for no more than 2 minutes, theoretically, that they feel is interesting, and we hope that you also feel is interesting. I'm going to get my timer set up, as I usually do, so I keep these guys under control, and we will get started in 1 moment. We decided in pre-production that Chance was going to go first, and your 2 minutes is starting right now.
All right, just wanted to touch on the in-season tournament, first quarterfinal.
For the NBA?
NBA in-season tournament. The quarterfinal games were last night. Myself, I'll be guilty of it. I was a little skeptical of the in-season tournament. I didn't know how it was going to work out. I think it was more of like a money grab kind of thing, Oh,
it definitely was.
For revenue, obviously, that's kind of a part of it, but I was pretty impressed about how everything was put together last night. Besides the courts, the funny jerseys, I had a good time watching the games last night. We had the Celtics take on the Pacers. The Pacers off to a terrific start this season, averaging 130 points a game. They were lethal.
Giving up 130.
I was just about to say that.
Aren't they all, though? But Tyrese Halliburton's off to a terrific start. He had a 26-point triple-double. He showcased himself for his second career national televised game last night. I thought he played out of his mind. But let's not ignore Jaden Tatum on the other side. He had 32, 12, and 6. He played very well. But these tournament games early in the season, I think, are very good. They bring teams together and bring the intensity early, and see they're kind of like tests for these teams. Who's legit early, who's not. Obviously, Boston's going to be a favorite down the line. And then the second game of the doubleheader, we had the Pelicans and the Kings. This was another great game. Kings were up pretty big early. The Pelicans came around. They're quietly playing very well, very good basketball, getting healthy. Zion's back. Brandon Ingram dropped 38 and 6, and Sabonis on the other side at triple-double. So they advanced to the semifinals that are in Vegas this Thursday. And then tonight we got 2, and I think these are going to be 2 great games as well. We got Phoenix taking on the Lakers. We know the history between those 2 teams. And then the Knicks and the Bucks, which pretty solid.
Yeah.
2 solid East.
Go
Eastern
New
Conference
York,
teams.
go New York, go.
So, no, I was pretty impressed with how everything was put together last night. Both games were playoff-like environments. There was a lot of intensity, and you can see that these players definitely want a $500,000 paycheck. So it was fun to watch.
Every single player.
It's always about money.
It's pretty good. It's always about money.
You hit it right. You hit it right on the button there, Chance. Right,
Sweet.
2 minutes exactly. Way to go.
Plus, they have days in the NBA like right now where nobody's playing, and they used to only do that on like Christmas Eve and like Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
and now because of the tournament, they're getting more.
For sure. I'm a believer that the season technically doesn't start until the trade deadline. Just that's when the intensity ramps up and players, teams get their moves on what they want to do. But, I like this too. It helps players from not sitting. It brings intensity. So yeah, I'm fun to watch. I'm excited to watch the games this weekend.
Nice. Mike has an NBA topic for his 2-minute warning piece as well, and we're going to get started on that right now.
Yeah, basically talking about just stupid trades that teams make in the NBA and what they do
In
constantly.
particular this season?
Yeah, mostly just right now. The one I'm looking at more is the James Harden trade to the Clippers. It made zero sense. They had a nice team put together. The locker room was happy. I like James Harden. I think he can still play, but I just don't understand the point of going overspending constantly. Teams put these pieces together that do not fit. It doesn't make any sense. You have too many guys that do the exact same thing, which is you take away from one guy's greatness and another guy's greatness, and you get half 50% version of both of them, or maybe even in Westbrook's case, because Westbrook, as much as I love him, doesn't play really well without the ball. It's the only way he's productive is if he has the ball in his hands. But teams have been doing this for a long time, basically since the whole super team, quote unquote, era started. But the main one that started it was the Celtics in the 2008 season with Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, and Ray Allen. But all three of those guys complemented each other perfectly, so it made sense. LeBron, Wade, and Bosh, it took them a little bit to get it going together, and maybe putting Bosh on the block instead of making him a 7'2" guard would have been a good idea at some point. But I just get tired of seeing it. Fan bases like seeing it. They like the super teams. It sells tickets. It brings money, but then there's no production. And then also, too, on the flip side of that, when these things happen, the fans don't give it any time to develop. Like, some guys don't just gel immediately. It doesn't happen. These guys have been playing at an individual high level for a long time. Kawhi and Paul George have been together for a while. Russ is not the same guy he was at one point in his career, but he showed last year that he could play with those guys. And then you bring in Harden, who's been a bit of a problem child, even though I think it's very similar.
Everywhere he's been a drama queen.
When he's happy, he's fine, and leaves the fat suit in the locker room. I just think it just gets annoying. I'm tired of the analytic guys running the NBA. Let the basketball guys do their jobs and make these deals the way they should be done.
Hit it right on the nose.
That makes perfect sense.
I was listening to a podcast the other day. It was Old Man in the Three, JJ Redick.
He does a good job. I like him.
Great. It's a great podcast. Richard Jefferson was on there, and then Tim Legler, who I also like a lot. And they were talking about the James Harden trade.
Did he leave the fake bake at home this time?
No, they went in on him, surprisingly.
Oh, yeah, they absolutely.
Tim Legler's orange, bro. I like Legler.
I don't mind him. But
no, I like him. He's good.
I will say though, they were pretty honest about it, and I'll always look back to last year's playoffs with James Harden. You drop a 40 piece in game 1 in Boston, you come out the next game and drop a stinker in 9. You come home and then you put up a 30-point game. The next game you put up 7. It's like picking and choosing. I've always loved Harden, but I've never gotten around to the point of him being that guy because he has lackluster.
He's the only guy.
He doesn't have a winning style.
He's the only guy in the history of the league who 60% of his points come from the free throw line. If he does, his numbers have always been inflated. I've said this for years. His shooting percentages have always been inflated because of how much he used to get to the free throw line. The guy was averaging 15 free throw attempts a night for years, and especially in Houston, because he was the show. I mean, he was basically the mid 2000s Phoenix Suns by himself. As far as the excitement level, and it sold tickets.
But do you know why he gets fouled so much? Is because he's a dangerous threat on the offensive end.
I was just gonna say that too. He kind of changed the game with the foul calling and stuff like
I literally watched him run through the lane and trip over his own damn feet and go to the line.
Ethan, is interesting as this speak is, we're going to move on to your 2-minute warning piece. You're going to delve into the National Football League and talk about the game that you previewed last week. The 49ers and Eagles.
I didn't preview that game. Matt did.
Oh, that's right. Go ahead. But we
did talk about it last week about how I did think the Niners would come up and win this game. Even before the game, I was talking to my family who was watching it with me, and we were saying that the Eagles are due for a loss, and boy, were they. But well, Niners just look like a completely better team. Plain and simple, at every point of the game. Well, there's pressure in the first quarter on Brock Purdy, and the rest of the game, there was no pressure whatsoever. And the difference between the first quarter and the rest of the game was so unbelievably different. It's crazy. Because in the first quarter, the Eagles were up 6-0. They had forced punts on all 3 of the Niners' drives in the first quarter. The second quarter comes, the Niners make an adjustment and just take off to the moon. And I think the Niners have figured out a way to beat the Eagles. And I think it'll be an interesting matchup in the playoffs. I don't think we'll see Sam Darnold in the fourth quarter again. But I think the Niners found a way to beat them, and they might even be a better team.
Okay, were you surprised by the score? I was kind of surprised by the score.
I wasn't. The 49ers have been waiting on that for a year. They said it last year after they lost when Purdy was out. They've been going for they've been on the revenge tour the whole time. The Eagles don't care. The Eagles are built for the playoffs, and that's what they care about. We'll see what happens in the rematch.
I wasn't surprised either because I mean, my team, the Commanders, we played the Eagles twice this year, and we arguably should have beat them twice. Like they're very vulnerable, and I've said it since week 2 with their run and passing defense, which is their passing defense is the worst in the NFL. I wasn't
Jalen
surprised.
developing as a passer is the reason they're still where they're at record-wise. But, I mean, losing their offensive coordinator, they still don't look right in the red zone to me. Yeah, they still don't look right in the red zone to me. They constantly get in situations. They've skated by quite a few games this year, but I still think they're built for the playoffs, and I think they're going to see they're going to play totally different come playoff time.
I was going to add as well, like they are pretty vulnerable this year just because of losing the coordinators. Like I think losing Jonathan Gannon, and I will say this, it has an effect. The offense coordinator has an effect.
They lost the fire in their gut.
You gotta change things up, and when you're off of a Super Bowl loss, it takes a while to get ramped back up where you were just at, losing all those pieces. The run game's been kind of MIA. Swift had a great start to the season. He's been kind of MIA. Gainwell's been MIA.
He torched the Vikings. That was the only game that he had that was like ridiculous.
Like 170 yards.
And I will say, like the Eagles were due for a shitter game. They really were. Like they were asking for it. I don't think I wasn't surprised really at all, honestly. So the Niners are a fantastic team. They have arguably the best built roster in all football.
They don't have Gannon.
They have not
Gannon to tell them to take the bus.
They have not struggled since they traded for Chase Young, and they're
stick
freeing
with
up Bosa.
He hasn't done much though. He hasn't had 1 sack. So
I'm going to stick with the ladies NCAA Division I volleyball tournament for my 2-minute warning, which is starting now. We're into the regional section, what we would call, I guess, the Sweet 16. The regional semifinals are going to take place on Thursday, December 7th. That's just in a couple of days. The teams pan out like this. Nebraska is going to take on number 5 Georgia Tech. There's a couple really interesting matchups in this side of the bracket. Arkansas versus Kentucky is one that I'm looking forward to. That's a good SEC rivalry. The next one, number 1 Wisconsin versus number 5 Penn State, is also going to be a really good matchup. That's a Big Ten rivalry right there. Purdue is also going to take on Oregon in that side of the bracket. Moving down to the bottom bracket, the lower bracket, Louisville is going to go against number 3 Creighton, who knocked out my Minnesota Golden Gophers. Washington State takes on number 1 Pittsburgh. Texas is going to go up against number 3 Tennessee, and our very own ASU Sun Devils are going to take on the number 1 team Stanford in their bracket. That is a major Pac-12 rivalry, so I'm looking forward to that game as well. Those two teams are very familiar, as are Wisconsin and Penn State, as are Arkansas and Kentucky. So those are some of the matchups that I'm really looking forward to. After we go through those games, the Elite 8, if you will, which are the regional finals, will take place on Saturday, the 9th, a couple days after the semis. And then the actual semifinals of the tournament at Amalie Arena in Tampa Bay will take place on Thursday, the 14th, and the championship will be played on Sunday, December 17th. So I'm looking forward to that. There's going to be some good matchups, some interesting matchups. And that's it for the 2-minute warning. We're going to hear from our sponsor, northeastvalleynews.org, before we move on to the main event. Hey, all, want to learn skills like video editing, audio editing, and copywriting? Join us at northeastvalleynews.org by enrolling in JRN 210 at Scottsdale Community College. Get the skills you'll need for today's media jobs. We're back on This Day in Sport. As I mentioned earlier, we are going to talk about NCAA football for the main event of the morning.
Shout out Bruce Buffer.
Michael Buffer. We go over this
Every
week.
Bruce
We
is
go
better.
over this. On Sunday, the selection committee which I guess it's 13 people. I found out that's sort of an unlucky.
The Shadow Council.
It's an unlucky
Let's
number.
get Lee Corso out
They
there.
Not so fast.
on Sunday,
No,
the
no.
College Football Playoff Selection Committee came up with their top 4 teams for the College Football Playoff. We've been doing this top 4 thing since 2014, and this year they came up with number 1 Michigan versus number 4 Alabama, and also number 2 Washington versus number 3 Texas as our matchups for the College Football Playoff semifinals. Had we had a 8-team tournament, which I've always thought would be a better idea than 4 teams, it would have included Florida State, Georgia, Ohio State, and Oregon, all very good teams, all very deserving to be in a college football playoff. If we would have gone to 12 teams this year, as we are going to go to next year, which I think is a big mistake, we would have included Mizzou, Penn State, Ole Miss, and
Liberty.
Oklahoma.
No, it would be Liberty because they're taking one team as the number 12
Yeah, I
seed
think
that's not Power
One
5.
Group 5 team, I
Oh,
believe.
that's right.
And Liberty went undefeated this year.
Oh, that's right. So
So you-
Oklahoma, Mike Brown, would have got
So,
snubbed.
We're gonna have that problem.
It's
coming up.
okay.
Instead of-
I'd rather than be out there
We're
watching
gonna have that
boat
next year.
race
We're gonna
again.
have that problem next year.
Hey, we've got our podcast subject. Keep in mind, our podcast subject for next year at this time will be, should the non-Power 5 team have gotten in?
Yeah,
The
it's
fringe
going to be a
11 and
blow.
1 team.
Whoever
So,
gets the non-Power 5 team
we're-
is going
right,
to have a very
we're-
easy route to the.
So we're all going to be talking about that. Principally the if we can
And
call
Georgia beats Coastal Carolina 85-3.
it could very
Like
well
that
be
one-
Coastal
that was
Carolina
revenue.
too.
That one Georgia.
Hey,
Tech game,
UCF
those
won a
two
national
were
championship
22
according to
nothing.
them. So
Well, they want they're
that
sharing
squad was pretty good though.
they're
That's
sharing
By
it
the way,
with
LSU
some
whooped them in a bowl game that year.
Yeah,
so-
I know.
they're
This is
sharing
true.
with somebody that
That was
doesn't want to
satisfying.
share with them. The principal controversy this year, if you haven't heard by now, is the snubbing, so to speak, of Florida State University.
We need the cash registered
Where-
people.
Cha-ching.
Yeah.
So here's what happened to Florida State. The last few weeks of the season were a little bit rough sledding for Florida
What
State.
happened to Florida State was sponsored by
In-
KY Jelly.
They lost their star quarterback, Jordan Travis.
And they
he
also
broke-
lost their
He
backup
broke his
too.
leg. I'm getting to that.
Okay.
He broke his leg during the North Alabama game, which he may or may not. It should have been playing it. I don't know. That happened on November 11th. So they brought in Tate Rodemaker, who helped them to beat Florida on the road, which was very impressive. I thought that worked out. I mean, I was kind of surprised.
They had it back.
I mean, Trey Benson was
and
really the reason they won that game.
So he sustained a concussion and was not able to play for the ACC championship game versus Louisville on Saturday. Instead, it was freshman quarterback Brock Glenn. He's their third stringer. They won that game, and they turned out to be the very first undefeated team from a Power 5 conference to not be included in the college football playoff since they started doing this crazy 4-team thing in 2014.
Oh, look, another flag on Louisville.
So
Yeah, that was interesting.
so I guess
First
the
for that
argument
game.
the argument that's been going on since Sunday is what we're going to talk about now, which is, are these the best 4 teams, and should have Florida State been included in the college football playoff?
Yes.
Pants, what do you
Okay.
think? Go ahead.
I think the committee made the right choice, and I wasn't even surprised waking up and seeing that news. I get it. Florida State was 13-0. They are a great team. They whooped my LSU Tigers week 1 for the second straight year. I personally thought if they had Jordan Travis, they had a great chance of winning it all. And I said that after they beat LSU. I was like, oh, Norvell's got that whole team turned around. I got nothing but respect for Mike Norvell and what he's done with FSU. Putting him back on the map, that should be a premier program in the country.
You're right.
Absolutely is.
But I will say, I think the committee did make a right choice. And I'll say this. Bama beating Georgia was very impressive. They've been writing Bama off all season. Jordan Milroe got benched week 3.
Jalen.
He's turned his season around.
Kalen Milroe? Is that what you said?
Jalen.
No,
Jalen.
Jalen Milroe?
that's right.
Jalen Miller.
Yeah, you
Um,
good.
That was
But
because Saban was trying to show how trash the other 2 quarterbacks were.
and I don't know what they were doing benching him. I thought he was a stud
He got
last
in
year when
trouble.
he came in. for sure. But I think they made the right choice just based on like scheduling. I think FSU didn't really play anybody but beating LSU, and that was week 1, which I mean, they keep that into account.
Carolina falling apart didn't help them.
Yeah, I mean, other than beating LSU, they didn't beat one other ranked team. Besides Louisville in the championship game, and that game was neck and neck until the fourth quarter. And I mean,
Wake Forest didn't do it for you.
yeah, totally. But I mean, their other premier win, I mean, if you want to toss Miami in there, I mean, Miami had a pretty down year per usual. I mean, out on the road at Clemson, that game went to overtime and they won
Miami's
6,
still
7.
so mid. They're allowed to pay
games.
guys now.
And then the argument of beating Florida, I've heard the same thing, but it's like they had a backup quarterback too. They're 5-7. They were one of the bottom feeders in the SEC this year. And the bias towards the SEC is totally there, and it rightfully so. I mean, I just wrote down.
Oh, trust me, it would have been
Well,
worse if
hey,
Oregon would
yeah.
have beat Washington.
If you've ever lived in the South,
I
and
have,
you
yeah.
know, right, you know
I
how
am.
big,
Yeah.
college football
God,
is down there.
college
Um,
football.
It's not, you know, you go to Minnesota and it's, you know, everybody's not rabid about the Golden Gophers football team.
Well, yeah, because all those
every
people
single
died
Saturday.
in the 40s. Were the last time they won anything.
That's 3 in a row to you, mister.
But I just wrote down here, since the college football started, 6 of the last 9 champions have been SEC teams, and 8 of the last 9 championship games have featured an SEC team. That bias had to play a little role in
Wait,
it.
which one was the one that wasn't?
Clemson.
Ohio State, Oregon was the first one.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah, I thought we were talking
Bama
about
was in the
Was that,
semifinals.
was that Mariota or is that
That
after?
was no, that was
Could
after.
have been.
But yeah, and I also think on the FSU side, having a third string quarterback, unfortunately, you know, that plays a role. This will be my last note of it before let other people talk. But I was looking online at what the committee like uses the process, and they wrote some notes down here. Conference championship 1, so that's one of the factors. Strength of schedule. So like I said about FSU schedule, you know, not playing a lot of people. Bama is in the SEC West. It's a lot more competitive than the East. Head-to-head competition. Bama lost to a team that's in the playoffs, so there's, you know, played them down to the wire.
I'll get that.
Comparative outcomes of common opponents. So that's like playing teams that have similar characteristics and stuff like that, ranking
Or the
wise.
same opponent.
Yeah.
Right.
And then other relevant factors such as unavailability of key players and coaches that may have affected the team's performance during the season or likely will affect the postseason performance.
Man, somebody wrote
Right.
that in late.
That's the key.
So I wanted to ask this question
The
as well.
eye test always used to be a big one.
I want to ask this question as well.
That test is
If
massive.
FSU matched up against Michigan, they were gonna get walloped.
Yep.
They let OU in for years just to watch them get beat down, and everybody knew that was coming.
But they had their starting quarterback.
They had premier players like, you know, the quarterbacks, stuff like that. But I wanted to ask this question. Would you rather your team go to the playoff as the 4 seed and get
Yes.
absolutely whooped in the first round, or would you rather your team go to a New York 6 bowl and win like a Sugar
They're
Bowl?
not going to
Citrus
beat
Bowl?
Georgia. That's the
No, I'm not saying they are, but I'm saying would you rather them go there instead of getting embarrassed in the Final Four?
I'd rather them go there, for being
Well,
honest.
Well, it's being embarrassed in
Are
front
you
of a
saying that
larger
as a Michigan
audience.
fan or as a?
As a Jets fan, yes.
That's Jets.
I'm saying
I
that as
think
a
I
Jets
think it
fan.
depends on the fan base of the program with that question, just because like you got old school like blue blood programs, like in my case being an Oklahoma fan, you know, multiple national championships. But like I can usually always tell if they have a real shot at it or not. Like I don't need to watch them go get beat down. I don't. Like OU is going to lose to Arizona. So
Oh yeah, you don't have your quarterback, so.
no, I know that,
And
but
Noah
that's what I'm.
Fafita is a dog.
But if you're a team, especially like a Florida State, like I know the fans are upset, but I'm like, come on, you
Let's
don't
be- yeah, let's
like
be
you're
real.
you're
Well,
you're a
everybody's
big-time program,
everybody's
too.
upset. There's senators that are upset, and I mean,
Yeah.
there's, you know, there's all kinds of people. The athletic director, senators, coach, everybody's up in arms.
And
And
I
I
think-
get why they're mad, but to me, it came down to one thing, and it was that Texas beat Alabama and Alabama beat Georgia. So the
It
reason
came down to money.
it did not.
Yes, it
So-
did.
Okay, so
They'll never
just,
admit it.
just hear me out here. Okay, so week 2, week 3? Week 2, Bama loses to Texas. Bama wins out and they beat the number 1 team in the country. Now, if they leave Bama out, they're saying, "Well, we beat the number 1 team in the country."
Oh,
Why
they
are-
didn't just beat the number 1 team in the country. They beat a number 11 Ole Miss team, number 13 LSU team,
Well-
and the number 1 team that just went back to back. So
Absolutely,
So,
but
they
yeah,
got
the
it right.
number 1 team. You beat the number 1 team in the country, and you're in the top 10. You deserve to be in the playoffs. And Texas's argument is, well, we beat Bama, so why wouldn't we be in? If they leave Texas out, over Bama, even though they had the same record and Texas beat Bama, they're gonna be like, oh well, why aren't we in? We beat Bama, so you're kind of backed into a corner here. And unfortunate as it is, FSU has to be the scapegoat here, and I think it was the right call.
The biggest nightmare scenario for the committee occurred when Oregon did not beat Washington
Yep.
because everybody thought Oregon was going to beat Washington. That way they could leave the Pac-12 completely out of it and get their dream matchup of having 2 SEC teams in there. They wanted Georgia in there so bad. They could not
Wait, let me
justify
ask you- let
putting
me
them
ask you
in over
something.
Texas.
You're seriously saying that if Oregon didn't beat, or
If Oregon
beat Washington, that
Oregon
they
beats
wouldn't get in?
Washington, I guarantee you Texas is 3 and Georgia's 4. I would bet my house on that.
I think Bama
I
was.
think you're
Very
probably
much
right.
disagree with
Bama's
that
still getting in
statement.
if they
Maybe.
beat Georgia. That game
Yeah.
decided who got it.
They might slide Oregon in there, but I do agree with you in the sense of the fact that Texas beat Alabama. So
you
you
know what it
had no
is?
choice. You
At-
had to put them in.
I believe at the end of the
if
day,
you were going to slide Alabama in.
I believe at the end of the day, FSU is never getting in no matter what. I think no matter what the outcomes were, if Oregon, Washington, that winner was going to go. If Texas wasn't going to lose, so they knew Texas was going to be in there, and then the winner of the Bama Georgia game, and then at that point you're just making with matchups stuff like that.
Right. I think you're right, Chance. I don't
This
don't
was the
think
first time in a
Florida
while they
State
had an
was gonna go in
opportunity to
with
put
their
4 teams in there that could actually play some competitive games for the most part too.
I think
Because
Washington.
there's-
Texas
there's
could be a
generally-
terrific game.
There's been the college football's been extremely top heavy for a handful of years, and like basically you had 2 teams and everybody else. And this is the first time it's a little more wide open because nobody's just insanely dominant. Michigan's played pretty well, but they've had a pretty
Cupcake schedule.
pretty
to be honest.
mediocre Big Ten schedule, and the quarterback and the running game is so good though, which is good in this time of year in this kind of football, and you don't have to ask the quarterback to do a whole lot, but he's going to have to do something at
I
some
wanted
point.
to ask this.
Something at some point. The
Yeah.
guy had an 80% completion.
No, I
percentage in
understand.
the
Well, I'm
championship game.
saying that,
That's
but
one of the best defenses in the country.
90% of their offense is based on their running game. I'm not saying he can't do it. I'm saying he's going to have to do it.
And I think he has the ability to do it.
I didn't say he didn't. I wasn't.
I agree
I
that
like McCarthy.
JJ needs to be a big factor in a championship
I just
run.
with the
but I think he's
offenses
able
that
to
with
do
the
that.
offenses that are in the college football playoff, he's going to have to make some plays. They're not going to be able to just line up and
Especially
do 3
against a
yards
Georgia-
in a cloud of rubber pelts.
especially against a Bama defense that is coming in with fire in their gut for sure. Because I watched the Saban pregame speech, and I mean I'm an OSU guy. I despise Saban for leaving OSU, but golly, you got to give him some respect. That dude is a hell of a coach.
He's unbelievable.
I don't understand how everybody's writing him off a year ago. They're like, oh, Bama's doesn't have it anymore. This and that. It's just like they're still here. They're top 10 every year.
Their defense
unbelievable.
hasn't been as dominant as they were during their primary run, and their running game hasn't been as ridiculous when they had those back-to-back dudes that
Yeah.
were going in the top,
when they had
20 picks
Quentin
in the
Williams on that D line, they were just
This
nasty.
is the first year. Like I watched Bama my whole life, but this is the first year I really watching Bama, and I'm saying they got a team. Like they're all playing together. They
Mhm.
play for each other. They're unselfish. I mean, it all relies on how Milrow plays at the end of the day, and he's playing.
No, they got covered up the last couple of years with the top level quarterbacks that they've had too. Because for a while back in the day when
Dave
Bama,
Coker?
no, I'm talking about
Wait,
Bryce,
so let me
Bryce
ask you
Young,
something.
Tagovailoa, and Mac Jones. But-
So let me ask you something.
Mhm.
Say that 4th and 31 against Auburn was incomplete, knocked down, and they still beat Georgia.
They wouldn't have made it.
They wouldn't have made
You
it.
think
That-
Georgia would have
Like,
stayed
it's
over
also this.
FSU?
It's just like LSU last year. They were
Yes,
11-1 and they went to A&M. They lost and they went to the SEC championship game. They knew if they win or lose, they weren't going to playoff.
Okay, but
It's like
would
the
Georgia have
bulk
stayed
of why
in is the
FSU is
question.
out is because Travis is injured. I mean, look,
For
I
sure.
cracked the jokes about money, which I actually believe that, but the bulk of it is because Travis is injured. They don't want to watch Florida State go get mollywopped.
right.
think
They got
it
their
is-
third
It
string
is partly
freshman
about money,
quarterback.
but I think it's the big thing is you can't leave Texas or Alabama out.
What do you guys think about Washington? They're kind of under the radar right now. They gotta.
They are. They're
on
not
a
the
close
the
game,
biggest
but they're
draw
really
for
good.
sure. But,
But-
it's going to be an interesting matchup against Texas because we don't know. They're so different. Michigan is very similar to Alabama. They both have a good defense. They both run the ball very well.
They beat the best team in the Pac-12 twice, and a lot of people were picking
Right,
Oregon
right.
based
They're
on
going
They
to
were
beat
it's
them.
9.5
going to be
point
it's going to be
underdog.
competitive.
Yeah.
I mean, I think everybody understands
think-
that that's going to be.
I
a
think people
competitive
aren't
game.
sold on Penix because they have 3 NFL wide receivers, and they think Penix is basically.
That's
If it
not
was
why
Heisman, they would.
I've always questioned.
No,
My question is
I
his-
know he's in the
his
Heisman. He's
lack
not
of
going to win it, though.
mobility. That's my question is when he's under pressure, is he able to escape like against a really good D
Yeah,
line?
Well,
I've-
he's also prone to the WTF interception So,
Well, that's
Yeah, I mean,
fair.
it's tough with lefties, but I mean, I've been watching Penix since Indiana, and he's a hell of an athlete. So he's been through a lot.
This has
Oh,
been
yeah.
an interesting
And he's a big dude.
conversation. I want to thank everybody for listening. We unfortunately are out of time right now. I'd like everyone out there to thank you for tuning in and checking us out. We had a good time talking about the college football playoff today. Check out our website as well at nevalleynews.org. Also, check us out on social media if you're into social media on all of your favorite platforms at nevalleynews.org. Thanks for listening. Until next week, as usual, be careful out there.